Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. My name is Sia Nejad, and this is the Solo Pod. What a week, everybody. I think everybody who listened to this podcast probably had a pretty great week. I know I had a pretty great week. Mike McClure had a pretty great week. But I'll tell you what, we are going to just dive into our lineup recap. We're going to dive into the Week 9 preview. But first, I do want to congratulate Daphne15, DAPHNY15, for the win on our FFT DFS contest. Very nice win, very incredible score, very familiar lineup, frankly. A lot of the people that we talked about, I'm super happy to see that. We're going to have our Week 8 lineup review, of course. We're going to do that right now. But I did want to talk real quick about some of the trades. I just, listen, you guys, everybody listening to this, you guys probably lean on Fantasy Football Today, like the regular crew, right? For some of the trade stuff and the sort of redraft impact. But I do think some of these are interesting and worth mentioning even on this show. I think some of these guys will have potentially some DFS impact, maybe not this week, but honestly, some of these trades actually might affect some guys who now have some spots potentially open up, like maybe Deion Jackson, for example. Just real quick, let me go through some of the stuff that happened today at the very least, just to catch some people up before we go to our lineup recap. Nyheim Hines to the Bills and Zach Moss to the Colts. I think that's really interesting because I think the conventional wisdom was James Cook was going to carve out a pretty special role, particularly in the passing game. And that is at least on hold with Nyheim Hines coming to town there. We saw Calvin Ridley. He's going to be part of the Trevor Lawrence offense next year. Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins and Chase Edmonds to the Broncos. I think that's interesting. I mean, obviously, Raheem Mostert's stock probably dips down a little bit because I think, Wilson and Mostert do a lot of the same things. So I think stock down for Mostert. We'll see with Jeff Wilson. I think that's interesting just because both of those running backs just played for Mike McDaniel last year, of course, with San Francisco. He was the run game coordinator as of, I think it was 2017, offensive coordinator last year, and now they're all reunited, but in Miami, not in San Francisco. So super interesting there. The Dolphins also pick up Bradley Chubb. I think that's very interesting. Hawkinson to the Vikings. I think we're going to be playing some Hawkinson. I mean, not this week necessarily, but I think we're going to be playing some Hawkinson because that is, in my opinion, a definite upgrade over Irv Smith, both in redraft and in DFS and Dynasty, all of that stuff. And Chase Claypool to the Bears. I see a scenario where we play Chase Claypool, to be honest with you, in DFS. Again, not necessarily this particular week, but I do see a scenario where Claypool will be at a price in DFS where he's going to be attractive. I mean, he's a big physical athlete, 6'4", 240 pounds, runs a 4.4, 240. Not exactly, your route runner, not a guy that's super dynamic. His release coming out of breaks, it's not great, but he's a big athlete. Justin Fields can buy some time, and I expect him with his huge catch radius to be able to get some targets in that offense. So I think Claypool is very interesting. And then finally, I did want to say before we get to our lineup review, and by the way, if you haven't already hit the like button, please do that. And I should mention our FFT DFS contest is live right now. The link is in the YouTube description right now. It'll be, if you're listening to us after our live YouTube show, which is of course happening right now, you can actually just go to the podcast and the link will be in the podcast description. So click on that. It's $5, 200 people. It's really fun. I really like this tournament. I think it's super, super fun. So definitely get in early so you're not shut out. Usually by Saturday, it's pretty full, if not already full. So get into that tournament now. Again, hit the like button if you're in here. I did want to offer my condolences to the Zimmer family. Adam Zimmer passing away, I believe at 38 years old. Condolences to Mike Zimmer, his family, Adam Zimmer's family. There's not much else to say about that from me. I certainly didn't know Adam Zimmer, but to me, when somebody dies at that young age, I feel like I need to remind everybody to just take advantage of every single day, even if it's a day that's just kind of a ho-hum day. There's value in every single day, and you might not appreciate that until you get a little bit older or until something like this happens around you. So instead of waiting for that moment, maybe you just appreciate every day and try to find value in every day, even maybe the off days. And if you do that, I think every day will have some purpose and some value to you. So just something to consider there. Again, condolences to the Zimmer family. Zach, I kind of want to bring you on for a second because there was a lot of trades that happened today, and some on the defensive side that don't really affect DFS, at least not immediately. But was there anything before we get to our cash and GPP lineup review, anything that surprised you or anything that you thought was high impact? And you can include redraft in that analysis if you like.
I thought the Hawkinson trade was interesting, just trading him in the division when the Lions claim, I know they've only won one game, but they claim they're competing. This kind of says the opposite. For the Vikings, I don't know really if it makes that much of an impact. Maybe like it's not on the DFS or fantasy side. Obviously on the football field, you're getting a great number 2 option next to Justin Jefferson. I was more interested in the trades that didn't happen. I'm not sure why they didn't happen. I don't know if you just saw it, but apparently Albert Breer reported that the Cowboys were in the mix to acquire Brandon Cooks, but decided not to because he has apparently an $18 million price tag next year. Probably should have done that. Would have been a great move. Kareem Hunt does not get moved. DJ Moore does not get moved. The Claypool move, I do agree with you on that one. I understand what they're doing, but like you're moving a top 2 linebacker in the league for a top 40 receiver. Like it's basically what they did. They just gave him the Ravens pick.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I think the Bears are really kind of building for the next couple of years. I think that's where the Claypool trade comes from. He's only 24 years old. If you picture him as a piece on your team for the next potentially, 4 to 6 years, I think he could create some chemistry with Justin Fields. I do think he's kind of the perfect, especially with Darnell Mooney being the number 1. I think you need to offset that with just a contested catch guy, almost like your Kenny Golladay type receiver who can just, when Justin Fields is in trouble, and I'm not talking about Kenny Golladay now. I'm talking about Kenny Golladay with Detroit before I get any sort of hate tweets there.
When he was relevant.
When he was relevant. Yeah. Poor Golladay. Maybe he's just in the wrong situation. And for the record, Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs. I know that didn't happen today, but Zach, you and I were talking about that before we went live. I think that's super interesting. I think I might have brought that up last week on the Thursday show when I was talking to Mike McClure, but I don't think it's really a debate that he's the most talented receiver on the Chiefs. I mean, Kelsey's kind of a receiver, but he's a tight end, obviously. Like, I don't think there's any debate there. It's just a matter of whether he can stay healthy and whether I hope there's nothing going on off the field that kept him away from the Giants. But if he is just going to be, a model player and he's going to be healthy, I mean, Patrick Mahomes has a huge asset there. So I think that's a guy we're going to look at, particularly in DFS, once we see what his role is going to be. Because I don't think his role is going to be, an immediate target monster, even though that could happen within the next, 2 or 3 weeks. Anything else before we go into our lineup review, Zach, that kind of just jumped out at you? Any teams that you think maybe had kind of have a foothold? Because like the Dolphins obviously made some moves here. They got rid of Chase Edmonds. They acquired Jeff Wilson. They acquired Bradley Chubb. I don't think they're nearly as good as the Bills still because the Bills are so great. But do you think they're the second in command in the AFC or maybe third after the Chiefs?
I thought they're probably third in the division, definitely second. One more note on Toney. I know last week we were talking about it. We thought Deshaun Jackson might play on Thursday night because I know you were really intrigued about it because obviously he's like he's kind of boom or bust. I feel like that's Toney, at least for the next few weeks until we see him get a role, because he could just go crazy, and I'm sure he's not going to be priced that high. So even like this, even in redraft and regular fantasy, he's I think projected 5 points, but I think that's like a low number. I feel like he could go crazy, and you just don't know yet. But the thing is, with Hardman, really never kind of came into that role. Juju, we've seen him come on a couple weeks, but MVS is kind of hit or miss, and they kind of need that spark that they lost when Tyreek Hill got traded. And it could be this guy, or it could be just kind of like a flame out. But he's interesting. I think he was the most impactful. Has the potential to be the most impactful of any of the receivers that were moved.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Zach, if you don't mind, maybe we should just go to the lineup review and we can bring up my cash lineup. Listen, this was really a great week for everybody, not just me. Mike McClure had a great week. And I got to be honest, I've never gotten so many tweets and so many private messages. And for the record, I welcome them all. My apologies if I don't get to them right away, but I've never gotten so many private messages on Twitter just saying like, this was my lineup. It was great. A lot of you tweeted it out, which I love that too. So I can actually see it and everybody else can see it, frankly. But I welcome everybody to tweet out your lineups, especially if they sort of come from what we have done, what this show has sort of recommended. And for the record, if you did well, I mean, this isn't a huge ask, and I know it's kind of annoying, but if you can review the podcast, that's a huge deal. I'm just going to be totally straight up with you. It's a huge deal for this podcast in terms of growing it and growing this particular brand. If you review it, 5-star review would be great. And I would anticipate that's what you'd do anyway. And maybe you write a few words as to why you think this is a great podcast. But honestly, it takes literally 2 seconds to hit the 5 stars, and you can add words if you want. If you don't think you have time for that, just leave it at 5 stars. Totally cool. But with all the success we're having, especially recently, I would just ask you to do that. Other than, the things like hitting the like button or retweeting things or tweeting stuff out, please review the podcast because it'll mean a lot to me. Just being perfectly honest with you. So I did 2 or 3 cash lineups. The reason I wanted to present this one is because it was a non-Ellinger one. So I think all my cash lineup, they all cashed. And I did have an Ellinger one, but I just wanted to put this one out there. I mean, obviously it scored a ton. It was great, 198.3 points, because I think the conventional wisdom, especially after Sunday, was, man, if you had Ellinger in your cash lineup, you were golden. And I just kind of wanted to put it out there that you could have paid 8,300 for Jalen Hurts and still had a dominant cash lineup. And look at these plays. Any surprises here? I couldn't have been bigger on Alvin Kamara on the early edge, the Friday prop show, and on the Sunday show we do for the early edge to preview the 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock games. I was all over Alvin Kamara's prop over 4.5 receptions. Absolutely loved it. I was all over him in the Tuesday early look. I loved him, especially again with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And I loved him on the Thursday show, game by game preview. No surprises here. Tony Pollard didn't take a genius to figure that one out. And that's why 85.5% of the field was on Tony Pollard. I don't know what the other 14% were doing. You don't do that fade in cash games. You do that fade in tournaments if you want to. Go ahead and take that chance. But in cash games, he really should have been over 90% in my opinion. Philip Dorsett was one of my 3 receivers in this lineup. I was just taking a shot there because I didn't have money to spend. And it's because I paid up for Jalen Hurts. So that's sort of where the offset is. If I pay down for Sam Ellinger, well, then Philip Dorsett can be somebody else. But Tyreek Hill, he was going to be a cash game staple. He was really a tournament staple for me as well. DJ Moore, we talked about him. Cole Kmet, I mean, I was just kind of struggling with tight end because I didn't have a lot of money left. Again, that's sort of the Jalen Hurts effect there. 2,900. I figured against Dallas, he would get some receptions, and he got 2 receptions, 11 receiving yards. Not exactly a banner day, but he certainly didn't kill me with 9 points. Raheem Mostert, not a good day. I had him a lot in tournaments. He was really the only thing holding me back. The lineups that I had Deontay Foreman in were great because I had them in with Kamara and Pollard. My running back pool was extremely, extremely small last week. Raheem Mostert, he was in, honestly, most of my lineups, and obviously getting 7.7 points isn't going to do me any favors, particularly in tournament. And then I had the Commanders defense. So just to recap, I paid up for Jalen Hurts. I played the chalk in Alvin Kamara, Tony Pollard, and Raheem Mostert. I could have obviously swapped out Mostert for Foreman. That would have been better. I played Cole Kmet because I didn't have money to spend. My receivers, Dorsett, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore. I got a couple snowflakes here on Raheem Mostert and Philip Dorsett, but it didn't matter because I absolutely smashed everywhere. These cash games are really, really advantageous to everybody here. And I had a question on Twitter, what type of cash games should I play? We've talked about this before, but the single entry cash games, double ups, I should say, that have like a decent amount of entries. I mean, you can play the smaller ones if you want. I tend to look for like 1,000 to 3,000 single entry cash game tournaments, and there are a ton of them in the $5 range, the $3 range, the 50, 25, 100, you name it, they exist. You can go down to 500, 800. I wouldn't do, super small cash games personally, especially if you're on the newer side, because those might be a little bit more shark infested than some of the bigger ones that have, like, let's say 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 in them. But those are the cash games to target. And these plays, especially at the running back and wide receiver position, they've been pretty obvious. I say it every week. I just really want to stress that to people because it's hard to win if you're just playing tournaments. It's not that it's impossible, but your bankroll management, you have to incorporate some of these cash games. So let's go ahead and go to Mike's cash game. If you thought mine was impressive, buckle up because Mike's was amazing. Okay. Mike was dialed in last week. His plays were so good. He puts up 242.84. Amazing lineup. And it's led with Sam Ellinger. He told us he was going to lead with Sam Ellinger, and that's exactly what he did. And look what it allowed him to do. Tony Pollard at running back, Foreman, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins. So that's something his lineup had that mine didn't. DJ Moore, that looks familiar. Foster Moreau, so recall that he was on Noah Fant, but things changed after Thursday, right? Because DK Metcalf unexpectedly was active and very active, I might say. So Fant was sort of out of there. I got a question on Twitter, and you guys are more than welcome to reach out to me specifically and Mike and ask us sort of updates. We don't do a show on Saturday to sort of update some of this injury news. And frankly, we weren't sure about DK Metcalf until Sunday. So once DK Metcalf was declared in, Mike pivots to Foster Moreau, which makes a ton of sense. I had a lot of lineups with Foster Moreau too. So some of these plays that we give out Thursday, I would say 80 to 90% of them are not in need of further news, but there are going to be some, especially if you're playing a low end tight end and it's predicated on DK Metcalf not playing. Well, it shouldn't take much for you to realize I got to go somewhere else. So Foster Moreau was a guy we had our eye on the week before. And we had, obviously, in this week, he was a solid play as well. He didn't get you any fire emojis, but he was a solid play. Alvin Kamara, 42 points. Man, I'm so happy. Like, just as a community, we were all on Alvin Kamara because not everybody was. Look, the 13.9% in cash games. Oh, wait, is this his GPP? Because it says winning 10,000. This might be his GPP. I'm not 100% sure. Let me double check. No, this is his cash lineup. I don't know why it says 10,000. He might have mixed it up. But the point is, this lineup is an absolute monster. Look at the 10,000 up top. It must be his GPP. This is an absolute monster lineup. And a lot of these plays, again, pretty obvious. If I recall, Mike was one fumble or one Sam Ehlinger mistake away from winning $90,000 more, from winning $100,000. So Sam Ehlinger just performs a little bit better against Washington, and Mike really, really cashes in with an actual takedown. But here, clearly, fourth in this tournament, and he wins $10,000. There were a lot of people in our community that were ranked fourth in their tournaments as well. So super impressive there. Let's put up my GPP lineup. So this lineup scored 231.88. It won $250 on a $15 entry, just to give you an idea. This was actually in the PME. Some of you that are listening might participate in the Pat Mayo League. It's a great, not league, the tournament that he does every week. A great tournament, $15 to enter. It's a 3 max. It's a fun tournament. And I was really close to winning this thing. I think I was fourth down the stretch. What I really needed was, again, you see Philip Dorsett here if you're watching live on YouTube. And if you are, hit the like button. But I needed something from Dorsett. He got a handful of targets. I believe he got 5 targets, but Davis Mills just looked off. The offense looked off. Listen, I played Philip Dorsett because I thought it would be a trailing game script, and the Titans secondary is very much exposable, and we knew Nico Collins was out. So it just made sense to take a flyer on Philip Dorsett. Five targets is fine. Like, I wasn't, the result was poor, but the process was fine. At 3.3%, I love that part of it. But honestly, if he gets loose for 1 touchdown, or if he gets loose for even, he catches 3 of 5 instead of 1 of 5 for 60 or 70 yards, then this lineup, it probably finishes in first place. I think it finished, I'm trying to remember, it was like 9 points out of first place, which would have been 5,000, I believe, instead of 250. So the lineup, and I'll just go through it real quick. It's a lot of the same plays. It was Tua to Tyreek Hill. That was the stack. No run back. Tony Pollard, Deontay Foreman, Philip Dorsett, DeAndre Hopkins. That looks familiar. I put Juwan Johnson at tight end. That was actually me asleep at the wheel because I had put him in earlier in the week, and I meant to switch him out for Foster Moreau, and this is just me forgetting to do it. Of course, Juwan Johnson still had some upside, and if I put Moreau in, it gives me an extra 5 or 6 points. It doesn't give me a takedown. It just gives me, instead of finishing 9th in the PME, I think it would have been 5th or 4th, something like that. So it didn't cost me a ton of money there. Alvin Kamara, Patriots D. I told you I was playing Patriots or Washington. Those were the 2 defenses I'm playing, and when we do an early look, there's really only 2 defenses I'm playing this week too. There might be a third if I really want to get contrarian and clever, but it's really going to be 2 across most of my cash and tournament lineups. So not much to talk about here. Deontay Foreman was really the main difference between this and my cash lineup, other than the Tua to Tyreek stack instead of playing Jalen naked. Obviously, Deontay Foreman was in a great situation, and he just smashed with the touchdowns. So that's obviously what you're looking for. And great lineup, scoring 231.88. So let's pull up Mike's next lineup, which I think is going to be his cash lineup as opposed to his GPP, but I might be wrong about that. Either way, this is Mike's second lineup. And this one, I think, scored 235.78. It was a Tua double stack. It was Tua with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle with no bring back. Again, we keep saying it. Don't force a bring back. If you don't like the situation, you could have tried to force Amon-Ra St. Brown. I actually did that in one of my lineups, and it was, very average. You could have forced DeAndre Swift or TJ Hawkinson, but you do not these days. It's great to correlate, but you don't have to correlate. I say that every single week, and it's really important. If you don't like the run back, do not force it. Tua double stack with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. This lineup wins $3,000. Wow, Mike was just on a run this week, an absolute run. He has Kamara, Deontay Foreman at running back. He has DeAndre Hopkins at receiver. He told you how big he was on that. Don't forget, on that Thursday show, we do a top 3 at each position. I should say Mike does a top 3. We do our cheat sheet where we both give out our favorite plays, and then Mike gives out a top 3 at each position. All of these should look very familiar, other than Foster Moreau, who was a late ad because of the DK Metcalf news. Interestingly enough, though, he had Foster Moreau double tight ends, Foster Moreau and Noah Fant. What does that allow him to do? Like, neither of those guys smashed, but it allows him to get a lineup with Tua, double stacked with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and it allows him to get Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Hopkins, Deontay Foreman. So again, Mike is a big advocate of this 2 tight end approach. This is a lineup that finishes 9th and wins $3,000. So for anybody that tells you, hey, don't do the 2 tight end thing, it's not about the 2 tight ends themselves. It's about what can the savings of those 2 tight ends do for the rest of your lineup. And if you smash everywhere else, which Mike did with fire emojis everywhere, if you're not watching on YouTube, Tua 32 points, Kamara 42 points, Foreman 34 points, Tyreek 34 points, Hopkins 36 points, Jalen Waddle 33 points. That is going to get you where you need to go in tournaments, regardless of whether your 2 tight end approach smashes. So absolutely love this lineup. He had the Jets as the defense. Great stuff from Mike. Great top 3 from Mike that he gave out on Thursday. Great game by game preview from all of us. Hopefully, I know I have very ample evidence that this entire community really kind of smashed. It was most people's best week this particular week. So highly encourage everybody to tweet out your lineups, tweet at us, ask us questions, particularly after Thursday. Hopefully we can answer them because the injury news kind of becomes a little bit more relevant Friday and Saturday into Sunday morning. And definitely hit the like button and review the podcast. That's our ask from you all. But let's look at Daphne 15. Daphne 15 was our FFT DFS Week 8 winner. And well, this looks familiar because it's the same exact lineup as Mike's cash lineup, which really shouldn't be a huge surprise. Our player pool was very condensed, and it's not hard to imagine that the FFT DFS winner would have what Mike had, frankly. Again, you listen to the show. We're not giving out lineups. I mean, if you've ever watched this show, we've literally never given out a lineup, but we give out our favorite plays of each and every game on Thursday. We give out our top 3s. We give out our cheat sheet, which has our contrarians, our fade plays, our chalk plays, our values, our stacks. So you piece that together, and you just might be the FFT DFS winner. Props to Daphne 15, Sam Ellinger at quarterback. Again, this should all look familiar. Alvin Kamara, Tony Pollard, Deontay Foreman as the running backs. Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, and DJ Moore, who we know DJ Moore got there late, obviously, with that amazing touchdown catch. And by the way, I know what Twitter is for. I know Twitter is for debating whether or not DJ Moore should have gotten that penalty. Listen, I'm a DJ Moore guy. I wanted Carolina to win that game. Not that I had a bet on them or anything, but I wanted them to win that game. An amazing comeback. He should have gotten penalized. Yes, I understand he took his helmet off as he was leaving the field and that his feet were off the field. But then he was kind of parading around with his helmet off, came back on the field. Like, if you really expect the officials to go to instant replay to see when was the moment that he took his helmet off, what was his foot off, did he come back? If you actually think we need like instant replay for that, or we need to sort of diagnose like where his foot is as he's taking his helmet off, then you're kind of the problem here, right? Like, that we don't need a debate on that. It was pretty obvious that he was going to get a celebration penalty right when it happened. I was kind of like, oh no, I think he's going to get penalized here. And that's exactly what happened. So I like DJ Moore. I think he got lost in the moment. He probably thought they had already won the game. He probably just wasn't thinking they needed the extra point. When you catch a ball like that, your emotions get the best of you. You think you just won the game. You take your helmet off and you celebrate. I kind of get it in this particular case. So unfortunately, Pinheiro just couldn't close the game, whether that be in regulation or in overtime. So terrible situation for the Carolina Panthers there. But love this lineup. Daphne, thank you for playing. Everybody, if you're not already registered, again, I'll say it one more time. If you're not already registered for our FFT DFS contest, register right now. It's in the YouTube description. It's in the Apple Podcast description. It's very, very easy to enter. And we usually fill up around Saturday. So we want you in there so that we can put your lineup up and talk about it next Tuesday for our solo pod. Okay, so here's the fun part, everybody. We're going to do our early look for week 9. And we've got a lot of teams on bye. We've got a lot of high totals. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of as much sort of condensed ownership as maybe we had last week, because I think there's going to be quite a few games that people, even though it's only 10 teams, I think there's going to be quite a few games that people are going to be interested in. With that said, we're going to get to that. But first, we're going to hear a break from, well, we're going to go to a break and we're going to hear a word from our partners. And we are back. This is FFT DFS, Fantasy Football Today DFS. My name is Sia Nejad. This is the Tuesday solo pod. On Thursday, it's me and Mike McClure. We go game by game. We talk about our favorite plays, our favorite stacks, our favorite roster constructions, our favorite contrarians, values, chalk, you name it. It's what we do in that show. We give out our top threes. It's an excellent show to really just get your lineups manifested, if you will. I think it's one of, I listen to other content out there, and there's a lot of other really good content. There's a lot of good content, let's be honest. But I think this is a show, that Thursday show in particular, that really sets you up to like start making your lineups, start constructing your lineups. You can tweak it as, Friday and Saturday roll around. But I think if you listen to the Thursday show, you're going to have a really good idea of what your player pool is going to be and how you are going to construct your lineup. So that's my pitch for the Thursday show. Let's do our early look. Let's start at quarterback. But before we do, I'll just point out that, again, it's a 10-game slate. We have 10 games. We have 6 teams on a bye. Those teams are the Browns, Cowboys, Broncos, Giants, Steelers, and 49ers. Quite a few high totals here. That's why I was sort of getting into the fact that you might have some sort of diversification of the portfolio in terms of like not all these players are going to be on 1 or 2 or 3 games. We got the Bills at the Jets. Interesting game. It's a huge spread. It's a 13-point spread. So you're not necessarily getting that back and forth, but you just might. There might be run back options in that game that we'll talk about, particularly at the wide receiver position, potentially at the running back position too, on the Jets side of things. That's a 47-point total. Chargers at Falcons, people are going to want a piece of. Listen, the pace is going to be very slow there. Atlanta doesn't run a lot of plays, but they're very efficient, and they're likely going to be very efficient against the Los Angeles Chargers, who haven't really been able to stop anybody as of late. Chargers coming off a bye. The Atlanta can't stop anybody either. This should be perhaps a slower pace overall, but a very high efficiency game for both offenses. There's injuries on the Chargers side that are going to make this stack even easier because you're going to have value on the Chargers side likely open up. We'll have to monitor practice reports. We'll kind of know a lot more on that on Thursday with respect to guys like Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, some of those guys. Mike Williams is not going to play in this game. But that's going to be probably the most popular game, I'm guessing. It's a 49.5-point total, and the Chargers are only favored by 3 coming off their bye. Again, that game is in Atlanta, so it should have a back and forth component that we'll be very interested in. The Packers at Lions, 49.5. Packers only favored by 3. So that's going to be another one of those games where a lot of people are going to want to stack the Lions and the Packers for obvious reasons. Raiders at the Jaguars, that's a 48-point total, and the Raiders are only favored by 1.5 here. I know the Raiders kind of fell on their face last week. I wasn't on any Raiders. I think you could have played Devontae if you wanted to do that. You could have played Jacobs, but he was 7,500 last week. I was not about to play Josh Jacobs at 7,500 with all the other value that we saw. So this might be a game to maybe get back on these teams because they've been very underwhelming the last couple of weeks. So Raiders and Jags, I'm definitely interested in. And then finally, the Seahawks. They're not hacks anymore. They're actually a very good football team. The Hawks at the Cardinals. That's a 50-point total. Cardinals favored at home by 1.5. That game could have a ton of fireworks, and there's a lot of value opening up on both sides of the ball, particularly with guys like Rondale Moore, who's emerging as a target guy, a guy that's in space, and a second, or actually I should say third quality target for Kyler Murray. James Conner, we need to monitor him because he might be coming back too. Let's pull up the QBs. If you haven't already hit the like button, please do that. But let's pull up the quarterbacks because, again, the way I do this early look, I don't go through every player. The show would take way too long if I did that. I just go through the players that I'm particularly interested in. And I say that qualifier because I don't know that I'm paying up for Josh Allen at 8,500. So I don't necessarily, we'll talk about him when we do our game-by-game preview, but I'm not sure I want to go there. I'm not sure I trust Zach Wilson in this offense enough. Listen, am I going to have a stack with Josh Allen and like a Garrett Wilson run back with Josh Allen stacked with maybe Devin Singletary and a pass catcher or receiver? Yeah, maybe, but it's just not going to be a primary stack for me. So obviously Naheem Hines comes into town. We'll have to kind of monitor what we think his snap share is going to be in this game, but I'm just not a huge fan of playing this game in spite of the fact that there's a lot of value that's going to open up. So again, we'll discuss that more on Thursday. I do like Kyler Murray, 7,400 at home against Seattle. Listen, Rondale Moore is emerging. He's cheap. I believe he's 51 or 5,200. We'll get to that when we get to the wide receiver section of this early look. But Kyler, DeAndre Hopkins, even Zach Ertz, James Conner, if he's healthy, all of these guys are viable against Seattle. period, end of story. So I don't like Kyler this year. I'm not a big fan, but there's always the chance that Kyler has a breakout game, that he just eviscerates a defense and he runs a little bit and he, hits DeAndre Hopkins and let's say Rondale Moore for 3 to 4 touchdowns. That opportunity exists. So it's something we have to consider. 7,400, I think, is a pretty good price tag. But Justin Herbert, he's obviously the guy that I think people are really going to pay more attention to, maybe than any other quarterback on this slate. 7,200 at Atlanta. Zach is clicking on his game log right now. We see these pass attempts, 51, 57 over the last 2 games. Now, maybe that changes coming out of the bye, but even if those pass attempts are reduced to some degree, I still think his pass attempts are going to be, certainly higher than most on this slate. There's not a lot to not like about Herbert, especially when you compare him with cost-efficient receivers, guys like Josh Palmer, who's going to be inexpensive. You can also pair him with Austin Eckler, which I've been doing quite a bit this season. So I do like Justin Herbert. Again, we have to monitor the injury status of Keenan Allen. I don't have a practice report from today. I know he didn't participate in practice on Monday. Mike Williams is going to be out. Bottom line, Atlanta can't stop the pass. They can't create pressure. Herbert's coming off a bye. It looks like A.J. Terrell's probably going to be out again. Casey Hayward is still out. Whether the pace is slow or not, Herbert should have a field day. Eckler should have a field day. So definitely interested in that. Cousins at 6,200 at Washington. I think that's a slight contrarian spot if you want to go there. The Washington secondary absolutely can get exposed. It wasn't going to be Sam Ehlinger that was going to do that last week. No matter the game Sam Ehlinger was going to have, he wasn't going to throw for 3 touchdowns. They weren't going to even allow the playbook to have him open it up like that. They didn't have to do that against Washington. I don't know that Minnesota has to do that either, but what I do know is that the receivers, particularly Justin Jefferson, Washington they're not going to be able to cover him. If Vikings come out and they're pushed by the Washington offense to any real degree and Kirk Cousins has to throw or decides to throw, if that's in the game plan, could he throw for 3 touchdowns? Could 2 of them go to Justin Jefferson? The answer to that is yes. So Cousins at 6,200, it offsets, at least a little bit, offsets the expensive price of Justin Jefferson. So I think he's in play in spite of the fact that that's a 43.5 point total. Again, Irv Smith is on IR. Hawkinson is on this team. We'll see how many looks he's projected to get on Sunday, just kind of being new in town. It could be a very condensed target share, and a lot of that could be going to Justin Jefferson. So keep an eye on that. Aaron Rodgers at 5,900 at Detroit. We have to monitor Christian Watson, Allen Lazard. Are they going to play this week? I kind of think they have to. I think at least Allen Lazard, if he plays, I'll be more interested because I think he's really a trusted receiver for Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, Romeo Doubs had a pretty good day the other night. So I think he's in the conversation, but I think we're going to see a lot of like floor games for Romeo Doubs and a couple ceiling games. So it's just a matter of whether you want to roll the dice there. But let's monitor Rodgers, 5,900 at Detroit. Is this finally sort of the bounce back spot for Aaron Rodgers? We kind of keep saying it. We'll see if it actually ends up happening. But 2 touchdowns against the Bills, 2 touchdowns against Washington. Could he go for 3 to 4 touchdowns against Detroit? Yeah, he really could. So I think Aaron Jones is certainly in that conversation in terms of getting a piece out of this game. And Aaron Rodgers could target Aaron Jones on a touchdown or 2 as well. So that stack, I think, is in play. But I'm probably just playing Aaron Jones out of this game more than anything, just pulling that piece out and moving along. Speaking of moving along, I'll just go over 3 quarterbacks in the 5K range that I like. Geno Smith, I always like him. At Arizona, DK Metcalf appears to be healthy. Lockett is healthy. You got Marquise Goodwin. You got the 2 tight ends, Disley and Fant. It could be a day for Geno Smith. We kind of keep saying that. Arizona pass defense isn't great. They're not terrible. As we see here, they're 26, but they do some good things. It could be a nice spot for Geno Smith. Maybe in a trailing game script, they just force the pass a little bit more than normal. 5,800 is a pretty good value, especially if you're pairing him or double stacking him with 2 pass catchers on the Seattle side. Derek Carr, 5,400, super contrarian spot there. He's 5,400. So if you want to pair him with Devontae Adams and just hope they break out of the slump, that's certainly viable. You could double stack him with Foster Moreau if you really want to get crazy. That assumes Darren Waller's not coming back. I just wanted to put that out there because his price is so low. Speaking of low prices, 5,300, Justin Fields. At home against Miami, a secondary that can absolutely get exposed even by Justin Fields. The cool thing about Justin Fields, and maybe a consideration in cash, is that he has a rushing floor, like a legitimate rushing floor of, somewhere between, it's been around 60 yards lately, but I think somewhere between 45 and 70 yards is sort of like where you can expect Justin Fields to be. Can some of those yardage end up in, can that end up with a touchdown? Yeah. And can Justin Fields have receivers get behind this defense, or at least carve up this defense with all the injuries they have in the secondary? I think the answer to that is yes as well. So I'm not a Justin Fields guy, but listen, I was considering Malik Willis at 5K. Obviously we played Sam Ehlinger at 4K. Jared Goff was 5,500 last week. Now is Fields in the Jared Goff conversation from last week against Miami's defense? No, but Justin Fields is also playing that Miami defense. So yes, it's a different offense. Goff is going to be more inclined to throw for way more touchdowns than Justin Fields, but Fields to Mooney, Fields to Kmet, it's going to save you a lot of money, or Fields naked for that matter. It's going to save you a lot of money. So something to consider there. Let's go to the running backs. My pool is going to be pretty small at the running back position. And I'll just start with Austin Eckler. Listen, I'm on Austin Eckler pretty much every week. I feel like I was on Austin Eckler before it was cool to be on Austin Eckler, when he was kind of like a little, light with the points in the first couple of weeks. But 8,800 is a big price to pay, but you can get the savings at the receiver position if you want to pay up for, let's say, a Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler stack. Maybe you throw in Josh Palmer there. I think that's going to be a popular stack, to be honest with you, because we know Eckler is getting the pass catching work. So it's not like you're pairing the quarterback with a true running back, right? He's only going to get a handful of rushing attempts. By handful, I mean somewhere between probably 8 and 12, 13. But look at the targets. Now, coming off the bye, maybe it's going to be a little bit different. Maybe they're going to pare it down a little bit, but still he's going to get targets. Over the last 2 games, 12, 16 targets. He caught 12 of 12 against Seattle. That's amazing. He caught 10 of 16 against Denver. The week before that at Cleveland, he caught 4 of 4. But the week before that, 6 of 7, and then 8 for 8 the week before that. So his efficiency is like incredible because he's getting kind of the easy targets, but what he can do after the catch is really the cool part. And against Atlanta, he could absolutely get loose. So I think a Justin Herbert double stack with Austin Eckler and maybe like a Josh Palmer is actually going to be more popular than people think. So I'm going to be on that as well. So I don't mind playing some popular plays. We see in tournaments in particular, a lot of the popular plays are kind of coming to fruition, fading the popular plays. Speaking of cool things, that's not that cool anymore. We're advocating both in tournaments and cash to kind of play some of these popular guys because they're coming through. So I like Austin Eckler a lot. I mentioned Aaron Jones already. He's 7,400 at Detroit. Really like pulling that specific piece out of this game. 24 total touches for over 150 total yards last game. He's been very efficient. I don't think, if you want to look at how Mostert did against Detroit, I don't think we're going to see that with Aaron Jones. Keep in mind the game script was a little weird with Detroit jumping out to a pretty big lead early. And frankly, even if they didn't, even in a neutral game script, the path with Tua was just to pepper Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle because it was just such a dominant force. And I don't think you're really going to see that with Green Bay. As much as we may still think about Aaron Rodgers, it's not the same thing. Aaron Rodgers to whatever, receiver du jour on the Packers is not to Jalen Waddle and to Tyreek Hill. So I think they're going to lean on Aaron Jones way more than the Dolphins leaned on Raheem Mostert, even if the Dolphins had been in a neutral game script. So I think Aaron Jones is great at 7,400. Travis Etienne at 6,300. That's kind of like an obvious play, right? I mean, he's been an absolute monster. James Robinson isn't there. Zach bringing up his game log here. I mean, this is, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about this. His yards per carry, let's say since week 5, 7.1, 8.6, 8.1, 6.5, 24 rushing attempts last game, and he caught 3 of 3 targets. So 27 touches for Etienne. This team is really like kind of crumbling, but what's not crumbling is Travis Etienne. And if they want to save their season in any significant way, they absolutely have to win this game. And for the record, they're in a division where if they go on a little streak, it's not like the Houston Texans and the Titans are pretty good, but it's not like the Texans, Titans, and Colts are such a formidable set of teams in your division that you can't rattle off 3 games and be in the conversation to win the division. So they will lean on Travis Etienne. He's their best player right now. So obviously at 6,300, I think he has tremendous value. As we go down the board, Mostert at 6,100. Things are complicated now with Wilson there. So I'm just going to skip over that because I don't know what Wilson's sort of contribution is going to be. That game's at Chicago. James Conner, just want to mention him, 5,800. Home versus Seattle. Singletary, 5,700 at the New York Jets. I think he's a great play if you want to be contrarian and play Singletary with the Bills defense, which I believe is 4,300. Nobody's going to play the Bills defense because nobody wants to pay up over 4,000 for a defense. So if you wanted to get a little different, people are going to play Singletary. That's not going to be the different part. But pairing Singletary with the Bills defense and just getting away from that game, otherwise, like no Josh Allen, none of the receivers. Maybe you play Garrett Wilson on the other side, which seems a little counterintuitive, but it's really not, because the Bills defense can dominate and Garrett Wilson could still get, catch 8 to 10 targets for, 95 yards and a touchdown. So if you wanted to save money there, you could do that because you're spending so much on the Bills defense. But that's something to consider. I like Singletary regardless at 5,700. Michael Carter at 5,500. He's a guy you could consider bringing back. I'm not exactly sure what James Robinson's role is going to be, so we'll just have to wait and see as the week progresses. But Michael Carter in a pass catching role certainly makes sense at 5,500 against Buffalo. Deion Jackson is interesting now because Naheem Hines is gone. We don't know the status of Jonathan Taylor's injury. So it's not a great situation playing at New England, but I think Deion Jackson's probably going to have a pass catching role in this game. So even if he's not efficient in the running game, I think we can count on some receptions for him. And at 5,200, it's not going to be that hard to pay off this price tag. And assuming Ellinger is the quarterback, I think he'd be smart to lean on Deion Jackson quite a bit. So we'll have to monitor that situation as well. And now I'm sure there's going to be more value that opens up, by the way. It's only Tuesday, but I think we should just go to receiver now. There are some really, really interesting value receivers on this slate that I quite like. But let's talk about some of the guys at the top first that I'm interested in. I talked about Justin Jefferson already. Don't need to address that again. It's 8,600. I think he's fine in a stack with Kirk Cousins. I think he's fine solo. I just think he's going to beat this Washington secondary quite a few times. I think this could be an absolute Justin Jefferson, what we've been waiting for, breakout type of game. So 8,600, I will be willing to pay up for. Tyreek Hill at 8,500, I also like. I'll bring up Davante Adams just because I think his ownership might be depressed a little bit because the Raiders look so bad. You can't really explain this target share, but we've seen it before. And we've seen when he's had bad games, he's gotten peppered the following game. So I could absolutely see him having a breakout game. But if it's between like Davante Adams and DeAndre Hopkins and Tyreek Hill and Jefferson, Davante's last on my list out of those three guys. I mentioned Hopkins, 7,900, home against Seattle. Certainly like that play for obvious reasons. He's getting so many of the targets. He's getting red zone targets. He is clearly Kyler Murray's favorite receiver, and he should do some damage at home against Arizona. As we get to sort of the more reasonably priced names, Jalen Waddle at 7,400 at Chicago. One thing I always like to check this time of year is the weather. So it's something we will look at more on Thursday. I assume the weather's going to be okay up in Chicago, but Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, I like them both. I mean, Jalen Waddle gets a ton of targets most of the time. He caught 8 and 9 targets for 106 yards, 2 touchdowns last game. This Chicago defense, they're losing a lot of parts because they're trading them away, but they're also just not a very good defense. And the way Tua and Waddle and Tyreek are clicking, I don't know that I'll get to a double stack with them, but we know Mike did that last week and he won $10,000. So I certainly don't hate that. It's just the game script with that Chicago game. I worry about it a little bit, but I like both of those plays. DK Metcalf at 6,400. Hard not to like him. Because of the injury, his salary is down, $200 to $400. If you recall, about a few weeks ago when he was running pretty good, he was 6,800. Then they lowered him to 6,600. Then he got hurt. Now he's 6,400. So you're getting a little bit of value there at Arizona. I think that could be a game that is pretty high scoring. Chris Godwin, if you want to play that game at the Bucs are at home against the Rams. We know Godwin typically gets the volume. I'm just not sure about the upside there. Tyler Lockett, 6,100, sort of in the same breath as DK Metcalf. They're only 300 apart. I would probably lean Lockett there over Metcalf. I think a double stack might be in play there, something to consider. Romeo Doubs, I talked about at 5,300. I think you could play McLaurin at 5,900. Especially if you're running a stack. I mean, McLaurin at 5,900 is pretty good value. We know he's a favorite of Taylor Heineke for a variety of reasons, namely that he's their best receiver and that he won the game kind of single-handedly or double-handedly with that final catch at the end of the game to win it for Washington. As a Commanders fan, those are things that don't happen in my world, and Zach knows this too. So for us to actually pull that game out was pretty incredible. Caught 6 of 8 targets for 113 yards. And a lot of that, admittedly, was the last play there. But if you're doing a Cousins-Jefferson stack, bringing it back with a McLaurin that's only 5,900, for the record, Washington hasn't been very good running the ball. When they are, it's usually Antonio Gibson. But one of my unders on the early edge on our prop show was You might have seen it because Sportsline tweeted it out. It was a play I put out on Saturday, actually, after the prop show. It was Brian Robinson under 58.5 rushing yards. He only had 20 rushing yards because he just hasn't been efficient. He's averaging, I think, at this point, maybe less than 3 yards per carry. It's not very good. Gibson's been a little bit better, but they're not using him as much as a runner. Curtis Samuel's actually mixing in to the running game again, which I think is very interesting. But I think a McLaurin run back at 5,900 in a Cousins stack or just a skinny stack with McLaurin on one side and Jefferson on the other side, don't hate that at all. I really don't hate that. So as we go down, we see DJ Moore here. He's starting to creep up at 5,800. He's at Cincinnati in a nice bounce back spot here. But again, if you watch the Early Edge Monday Night Football preview, which was last night at 7:30, Early Edge does a show for every single night game and the entire slate, of course. But I hope you watched it because I was all over the Browns plus 3.5. I was all over the under 47.5, which ended up coming in by 0.5 point. But I encourage everybody, if you watch these shows, you might be betting too. And if you are, you should be watching the Early Edge and you should be subscribed to Sportsline. Guys like Jacob Gibbs, Mike McClure, they write content for Sportsline. But then, of course, we have our free show. They have a free show, the Early Edge, that comes out every single day, usually multiple times a day with best bets, Monday Night Football previews, Thursday Night Football previews, Sunday Night Football previews, and, of course, main slate previews as well. They have a Tuesday full slate review. And then on Sunday at 12, I'm on the show to do the main slate preview with all the bets that we like and prop bets and things of that nature. Highly encourage you all to subscribe to the Early Edge and Sportsline if you're not already. As we get to the value, I think this is the important part. From a value standpoint, there's a lot of receivers down here. I mentioned Romeo Doubs at 5,300. I'm not sure I want to play that game. We'll have to wait and see if Allen Lazard and Christian Watson are playing. If they're not, I do like Romeo Doubs and maybe some other Packers receivers that we'll talk about on Thursday. But look at what we have here, guys and girls. Curtis Samuel at 5,200. I think it's interesting against Minnesota. Probably some high value targets, probably some rushing attempts, but Rondale Moore. Zach, let's click on Rondale Moore and let's see what he did last week because he was pretty much a monster. 5,200. He's at home against Seattle. He was on the field for almost every single snap for the record. They were getting him in space, which I absolutely love. Clearly like designing plays specifically for Rondale Moore, which I wasn't sure they knew how to do prior to last week. 8 targets. He caught 7 of them. He had a long of 38, which was a pretty electric play. 92 total yards and a touchdown. He had a couple rushing attempts too. So they're trying to basically, listen, they don't have Marquise Brown. They don't have a lot of guys that can stretch the field or just sort of run end arounds or sweeps or things of that nature. They just don't have those guys right now. And Rondale Moore is the guy for them to do that. So DeAndre Hopkins is getting a lot of the underneath stuff. And Rondale Moore is getting a lot of the stuff designed for him in space. So at 5,200, I'll tell you right now, he's going to be super popular. He is going to be a super popular play. So keep that in mind, but it's not going to inhibit me from playing him. I like Rondale Moore a lot against Seattle. I mentioned Curtis Samuel. I mentioned Josh Palmer earlier in the show, 5,100 at Atlanta. You can't really go wrong there, especially with the injuries that the Chargers are expected to have. We'll see about Keenan Allen. Mike Williams is definitely going to be out. Josh Palmer might be the number 1 receiver in that game. If he's not, he'll be the number 2. And so the number 2 receiver in the highest total on the slate, and he's 5,100. I just, there's not much to argue with there. I like him quite a bit. Garrett Wilson, I mentioned, he's 4,800. He's a nice bring back in that Bills game. If you're stacking it, even if you're not stacking it, maybe you do a skinny stack with like Singletary and Garrett Wilson. Maybe you do the Singletary Bills defense with Garrett Wilson, whatever you want to do there. I absolutely think Garrett Wilson is in play. Let's monitor the status of Corey Davis, though, because I'm not 100% sure he's playing, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on with Elijah Moore. He didn't get traded before the deadline. Not that I expected him to, but is he going to get benched? Is he, like, what's going on there? I expect him to play and get a full allotment of snaps, to be honest with you, if Corey Davis is out. But Garrett Wilson looks to be the play there as the primary target in a negative game script. I brought up Darnell Mooney earlier, 4,700. You can do worse against the Miami secondary. I don't even think you need to necessarily stack Justin Fields with Darnell Mooney. You can if you want, but 4,700 Darnell Mooney, he's not going to get a ton of targets, but could he get loose for a touchdown and 100 yards against Miami secondary at home? Yeah, I think that's possible. Khalif Raymond, it's a $4,000 price tag. I think it's worth bringing him up against Green Bay. He caught 3 or 4 targets last week, and he's been on the field a good amount. And Terrace Marshall, 3,900 at the Bengals, caught 4 of 9 targets last week, had a 93% snap share, definitely a red zone threat, big, good receiver. Now that Robbie Anderson is gone, they've really kind of put a focus on him beyond DJ Moore, or at least after DJ Moore. 9 targets is nothing to nothing to just look off. The efficiency wasn't there, but he's getting some high value targets. And at the Bengals at 3,900, I think he could do worse. Before we close with defenses, let's go to a few tight ends that I like. And forgive me with the chat. I'm running through this so fast that I haven't looked at the chat, but before the show is out, I am going to take a look at it. Zach Ertz, and by the way, if you haven't hit the like button already, hit it. Zach Ertz at 5,100. I just think anybody in that Seattle-Arizona game is going to be quality. Ertz with a nice bounce back last week, playing against a Seattle defense that doesn't do it. Listen, Arizona and Seattle, neither of them do a good job covering the tight end. So you're probably good with like Will Dissly, maybe Noah Fant, probably Will Dissly. You're probably good with Zach Ertz at 5,100. Interestingly, because of how this slate has shaken out, he's the most expensive tight end on the slate. As we go down, I think Gerald Everett is interesting at 4,800. Again, especially if Keenan Allen remains out, Mike Williams is out. I think Gerald Everett could be a target. Not sure I want to pay up to 4,800 there, but we'll see. Again, we just have to monitor the injuries. Kyle Pitts, 4,500. I don't have a problem with that. I think Kyle Pitts is fine at 4,500. As we go down the list, Evan Ingram at 3,300, I think is interesting. He saw over 20% of the targets last week, caught 4 balls, 55 yards and a touchdown. Played over 90% of the snaps. Raiders not good against the tight end. I mean, that's kind of the formula, right? So if you want to pay down for tight end, I think he's interesting. You could go really low at the tight end position and play Brock Wright, who I believe is going to be the new tight end du jour for the Detroit Lions because they just traded away TJ Hawkins. They have another tight end in the fold, but it looks like Brock Wright is likely the guy this week. Do I want to play 2,500 for Brock Wright against Green Bay? Not unless I just want to like show off because he happens to go, the 1% chance he happens to go off. And I talk about how smart I am for playing Brock Wright. So I don't think I'll go there, but I'm just bringing him up because if for some reason you only have $2,500 left, you do potentially have, well, you definitely have a starting tight end for the Lions, whether it's Brock Wright or the other guy, because they're both priced at 2,500. That's it for tight end. I mean, I'll tell you with the tight end group, I'll probably be playing a decent amount of Ertz, a little bit of Everett, and Evan Ingram. That's probably going to be my tight end pool. And I'll probably end up playing, because Ingram's price is so good, I think I'm going to be willing to eat the floor there, even though I think his floor is higher than most in that range. If I crash and burn on Evan Ingram, I'm okay with it at 3,300. But I do think Ertz is very, very interesting at 5,100. It's a reasonable price. Defenses. There's only a couple that I'm interested in playing. It's the Panthers at the Bengals, because the Panthers are only 2,300. And don't forget, Jamar Chase isn't back. It's part of the main reason I like the Browns last week last night is because I knew the Bengals weren't going to be able to do what they had been doing the last 2 weeks. I think everybody just assumed it was going to be plug and place. No Jamar Chase. Oh, we're just going to operate out of the shotgun and be just as efficient with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and Mike Thomas and our sort of new running efficiency with Joe Mixon. It's not how it works, especially when you finally get a pass rush, which they hadn't gotten the previous 2 games. You got 2 really good pass rushers coming at you in Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, and they got there. So I think the Panthers are interesting. It is a nice bounce back spot for the Bengals, but Panthers only 2,300, 2,400. Washington at home against the Vikings. I think it's a great spot for the Vikings, but at the same time, Kirk Cousins, can he produce some turnovers? And Washington's only 2,400, and they can absolutely get after the passer. So will they get beat deep a couple times? Yeah. But could they possibly get to the quarterback, cause a fumble, maybe get a defensive touchdown? At 2,400, I'm willing to take that chance. And then I mentioned the Bills at 4,300. Zach, that's our early look. Sorry for racing through that, but because we did, sort of the trade stuff on the front end, I don't want the show to get too long, but I also want to look in this chat to see if there was anything perhaps DFS related as I scan this. If you see one, Zach, you can just put it on the screen and I'll read it out loud, but I don't really see any DFS related questions here. Okay. Brian Patterson says, are there any players whose value you like less or more on FanDuel compared to DraftKings? Okay, Brian, you might have been the person that tweeted at me last week, and forgive me for not getting back to you. It's a good question. And I actually don't know the answer to it right now. Like this podcast has been sort of, primarily focused on DraftKings because I think that's where the majority of our audience is coming from. I know I only play DraftKings. That's something, Brian, we can look into because that's pretty good content to know, who is priced up or priced down on each platform, because it gives you an idea of like where you're really getting value, like on FanDuel as opposed to DraftKings, for example. I don't have the answer to that question on a Tuesday. Mike usually knows that though. So I'm going to bring that up to Mike, because usually on Thursday, he has a few guys that are like clearly mispriced on, let's say, FanDuel. Not that there's mispricing on both platforms, of course, but to the extent people play FanDuel, that there are some sort of discrepancies there that maybe I can get Mike to at least point out a few like tremendous values on FanDuel. Because Brian, clearly, if you're asking the question, you play on FanDuel, and I don't want to disparage FanDuel. I play DraftKings because that's where I started, and I think DraftKings from a contest selection standpoint and a platform standpoint, I just, it's pleasing to me. That doesn't mean it's pleasing to everybody. So if you play FanDuel, we'll try to at least get a sliver of content that you're asking for on FanDuel, because you're part of our audience and we want to serve you as well. Everybody, thank you for being in the chat here. I see Juan Ramos, Lenny plus Foreman for Gabe. Oh, this is a trade question. Lenny plus Foreman for Gabe Davis and Josh Jacobs, PPR redraft. Zach, can you answer that for us?
If you can get Gabe Davis and Josh Jacobs, do it. But I would not be making that trade, even if that was the other person.
Yeah, fair enough. I didn't have a chance to really process that trade, so I'm just going to go with Zach's advice there. Mike's always in our audience. He says, it was a bad call. Oh, you must be talking about the DJ Moore thing, Mike. Mike, I love you, but like, again, he took off his helmet. Like, I don't know. Oh, that's what you're saying. Okay, my bad. I was stuck on that. I went with Olave versus DJ Moore. Okay, that makes sense. Well, okay, it kind of makes sense. So let me say this. Mike, by the way, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I assume you already hit the like button. Mike, you're in here all the time. I certainly appreciate you. Everybody that's always in here, it's very easy. Derek, I see your name here all the time. And forgive me for forgetting. Brian, you're probably in here all the time too. But I appreciate you all being in here watching this show live. But I don't hate that, particularly in tournaments, because we knew DJ Moore was going to be super popular. And while we enjoyed DJ Moore's floor, there was certainly a possibility. I mean, listen, he got, can we be honest? He got there because he caught a bomb at the end. In terms of actually having like tournament value relative to his ownership, he got there because he caught a bomb at the very end of the game. One of the most unlikely bombs. It wasn't even a Hail Mary. It was just like he ran a fly route and PJ Walker, who is better than people think, just hit him in stride, like 65 yards down the field. So I don't hate that play. In cash lineups, I would have gone with DJ Moore all day over Olave. But in tournaments, even though you would have had to pay the $700 extra because Olave was $6,000 and DJ Moore is $5,300, I know I was touting Olave last week. I don't know if he was like my favorite play. I don't remember the manner in which I touted him, but I absolutely loved Olave last week. I loved Kamara too. For me, I ended up getting, because I didn't have a ton of involvement in that game other than Kamara. So for me, I was kind of making a decision between Kamara and Olave. And so, Mike, what I think what happened with you is if you weren't already on Kamara, then you might have gone with this Olave over DJ Moore stack. I think if you were on Kamara, though, I think the play probably would have been to get off Olave. Now, they both could have gotten there against the Raiders, obviously. But if you're looking for that smash game from Kamara, you're looking for it in the receiving department specifically, because we treat Kamara like we treat Austin Eckler, and Kamara smashed. He absolutely smashed both in the running game and the receiving game, but he was getting those receptions that we thought he would get. And so if you're doing that, you're probably taking at least a little bit of that catch equity, reception equity, perhaps even some of that touchdown equity away from Olave. So if you really believed in the $7,100 Kamara play, yes, you could have also played Olave, and you could have brought it back with Josh Jacobs or Devontae if you really wanted to spend up on your lineup for that particular game, because it made sense, right? But for me, I ended up having Kamara in almost every single lineup, and therefore I ended up paying down for DJ Moore because I got the savings, right? And I wasn't paying up as much for Olave. I did have Olave in some lineups, though. Don't get me wrong. So I don't like. I guess my point. That's a long way of saying, Mike, you didn't necessarily make the wrong play. I just think there was an additional consideration there with Alvin Kamara and how you wanted to play both of those, if at all. So, Brian, thanks for the love. Thank you for loving the show. Please go review it if you can. Not a DFSer, but this is a great informative listen, says Wesley Wilcox. Okay, Zach, we got to put that up. I think I might screenshot that and just put it as my like profile picture. Just take my face off of it. Not a DFSer, he says, but this is a great informative listen. If you thought this was good, Wesley, wait until you tune in on Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, because this show is pretty good. Tuesday's good. Tuesday's 7 out of 10. Thursday, and 7 out of 10 is good. It's a passing score, 70%. I don't want passing scores. I think it's a good show. Thursday, though, me and Mike, it is a great show, and we really iron out the plays that we really love. And what did that result in this last week? A ton of money for a lot of our listeners who we have evidence on Twitter of, who just tweeted it out or messaged me or what have you. We know Mike was in fourth place for almost won $100,000, but because of one Sam Ehlinger play, he dropped down to fourth for $10,000. I almost took down the PME. I almost took down a couple of other tournaments. It really just came down to Dorsett just not being as efficient as I would have wanted him to be. If he catches a couple more balls, maybe gets in the end zone, my big day becomes a very comfortable 5-figure day. So Derek Graham, Sia ain't wrong. Thursday is nuclear. Man, I appreciate all of you so much. I want you to be in this chat every Tuesday and every Thursday. It genuinely means a lot to me. With all of that, I hope you enjoyed the trade deadline. I certainly did. I hope you enjoyed this Tuesday solo pod. I certainly did. And I hope you're back for Thursday for our game-by-game preview, because I certainly will be. Until then, this is Fantasy Football Today, DFS. This is your Tuesday solo pod. We'll be back on Thursday at 5 o'clock for our game-by-game preview. We'll see all of you and then some on that day at that time. Thanks.